Once a clustering algorithm returns data, again, you have to apply a little bit of intuition and knowledge to figure out what's really going on inside these clusters. We'll show an example later where the system can help us with that. But for this, we can do a quick look. We see the yellow cluster up here in cluster 3. We have Harley-Davidson, Yamaha, Kawasaki. A lot of these are going to be our motorcycles. And with the knowledge that we have, we probably understand that these do go at a high rate of speed, and accidents that involve motorcycles are more likely to include a fatality, just because they're motorcycles. So again, that cluster makes sense to us. In the middle, we're going to have mostly passenger vehicles. If you look at these, we have some outliers on the speed side with Porsche, but in general, you're going to see names in here that represent regular passenger vehicles. And then kind of the outlier group here, cluster 1 in blue, you're going to notice the speed of these is lower and the fatality rates, average a little bit lower. If we look into these names, we'll see things like Bluebird, Mack, and what these actually are transportation vehicles or semi trucks. So again, a lot of times when accidents happen with these, they're going at lower speeds, they're docking, they're transporting, and when accidents do happen with them, they tend to have a lower fatality rate involving the drivers of these vehicles just because of the mass of the vehicle itself is usually protective. So that's our clustering insight there. Now, just to compare it, to do this with a regular system, you would actually have to set up the nodes that run these clusters. You'd have to set up the bandwidth to go through and perform these calculations. If you know what you're doing, maybe it's only 15 or 20 minutes. If it's your first time, it could take you a few hours to do it, but you've seen it done here with Power BI Desktop just with a couple clicks once we have this scatter plot pulling the data. So again, something pretty powerful. We're going to show an example on the Power BI service of what it can do as well here. So similar to clustering, we're going to do binning here. So with clustering, the algorithms go out and they figure out what clusters to create. With binning, what we're actually going to do is tell it what segments to create, and then we can do some analysis on top of those. So let's go ahead and do that here. This visualization is already set up. So once we create this, it'll actually work like magic. But we're going to create a group with driver age here. And we're going to make our bins 10 years. So basically decades of driving. So 20s, 30s, 40s. We'll keep it simple. What our visualization is going to show us after it loads here is speed limits and number of accidents. So it looks like we could grab some insights here, but what we're actually grabbing, if we think about the data, I can look at this increase of 20-year-olds. What it's actually going to show is which areas have speed limits of 55 versus which areas have state speed limits of 45. And so you're going to see a lot of insights come out about state information. So not necessarily helpful for diving in, to trying to figure out insights on a data set like this. That's not what we're looking for. We're not really trying to find states that have different speed limits at different levels. And so that's where Power BI, the Power BI service itself comes in. Again, the Power BI service is different than the Power BI desktop. So this tool is a paid tool that links into desktop, but it gives us a lot more power. So a lot of the new machine learning and AI technology that's coming out from Microsoft goes on the service side first, which is on the web here, where the subscriptions start at $10 a month a user. So we'll use this to show how we can say, okay, well, I have this visualization. I think there's probably some data in here, but I'm not sure what I'm going after. I can click this Get Insights button. And similar to the increase you saw before, it's going to come up with insights, except this time I didn't point it to anything. I just said, you have the data set that drew this visualization. Show me any insights you can find on this data. And so it's a little different than explaining the difference of this increase and decrease. We're looking at it with a broader swath here. And one of the interesting ones right here, there's a correlation between the number of people in vehicles and the number of accidents, right? So this is actually something that shaped policy, in the recent future, where we see as younger people get licenses, some states put restrictions on how many people can be in a vehicle. And it's because exactly this, when we actually look at the data, we can see a correlation here between number of people, cars, and accidents, and understand that there's something going on there that maybe wouldn't come to mind. And so then you get into things like distractions, talking between people that causes this. But it's interesting to see something like this played out in the data. And again, we weren't necessarily looking for this. We were just looking at accidents by speed by age, but it went out into the data set and found this for us. So, all right. So good example there of what can be done with the Power BI service that goes a little deeper than the Power BI desktop. What we're going to show last here, and then hopefully we'll have 5 to 10 minutes left for Q&A. We're going to show our last data set. And for our last data set, picture us as a software company, and we have a product where we're selling subscriptions to content creators. So we have a basic subscription and we have a premium subscription. And we've sent out customer satisfaction surveys to all of these companies to rate their satisfaction in various areas and tell us what's important to them. So you can see we have our customer table here based as our fact table. We have where they are, what size of company they are, what their role is, the support tickets they've logged. So a very customer-centric data set here, trying to figure out customer sat. Similar to the Q&A tool, what we're showing here is this key influencers visualization. So that's right here on the insert. These are already wired up. So the difference between what we're doing here and before is when we click on this, you can see my middle panel here, analyze rating. So we're laser focused on the rating. We know what we want to expand on, and we want to see what influences this. Whereas before we were looking for insights on the data, or we wanted to look at something like an increase or decrease and get some extrapolation based on that data. Here we pick what we want to focus on, and we pick what we want the system to look at. So we're looking at customer size, tenure, subscription type, the customer's role in their organization that filled out the survey. And what we can look at is the key influencers based on these items of what we're seeing here. And we're not seeing a big churn here. So tenure 0 to 29 months, we get 1.17x as an increase. Role in Oregon publisher 1.12x. By and large, these aren't movers and shakers. These pretty much fall in line. But what happens if we pull this up and we focus on the low end and we pick a different set? So we're going to throw in subscription type and theme. Theme is basically what's important to the customer, what's most important. And now you can see we really have some variance here. We're over 2.5 times as likely to get a low rating from a customer that says usability is their primary issue with our platform, and security. So these are issues we want to go after and figure out. Subscription type is Premier, also it's pretty high, 1.8 times as likely to report unsatisfactory. That's not good since we're probably charging more for our Premier service. So that's something we're going to have to look at as well. And so you can pop things in and out of this explain by box to get a little more clarity around what's going on. But what we can also do with this, you see this top segments here. Now, when we talked about clustering earlier, we talked about, the system goes in, creates the clusters, and then it's up to you to figure out the meaning of those clusters and what the underlying data is really telling you. What this segment does is it tries to do that for you. So if you look at top segments, we're going to look at the top 5 segments of customers that rate us highly. And then we can click into these and we can see what the details are. So this was not available with our regular clustering. But we can see this segment there, we'll get a 94.7% approval on. The company size is not mid-market there, 55,000 to 50,000. Our highest group company size is, so that's probably not, but company region is not UK. And then again, we can look at this from the lower side as well. So we can see pretty bad ratings here, and likely that our rating's low. This is probably where we want to start digging. So again, we get that subscription type as Premier popping up again. Theme is security. So a large group of people that are in a segment are focusing on those items. And then we can go through here. And again, this gives us a starting point to then figure out what we want to do with the data. What actions do we want to do? And so traditionally, this kind of segmentation takes a lot more work than just plopping a visualization and pulling some fields over. So again, another great addition that Power BI has added for free here that you can use with your own data. So, all right, that leaves us with about 5 to 7 minutes here. So I know that was kind of a sprint through 3 different data sets, but I'll pause here, see if we have any questions.
So Ed, we did have one question that has come up, wondering if it's possible to send out some of the files for this so that attendees can see how the back end is set up. I wasn't sure if that was something you were able to share or not. I did give your email address so people could reach out to you directly if they wanted you to walk through it with them.
Yeah, so these are demo data sets that are fine to share. Just on the back end, these are all done with CSV and Excel files, just to make it easier to pull up. And then the PBIX with them as well. We can share that as well. So if you reach out to me with email, that's the best way to do it. I don't think we can publicly put these up, but it's pretty easy to share these over email. If you give me your contact information, I'm happy to do that.
Great. And if other people have questions, if you'd like to post them in the chat, we'll be happy to share those, or raise your hand and we'll be glad to unmute you so that you can help ask questions. There was quite a bit of conversation, Ed, also about the upcoming data workshops, Power BI workshops that you've been working on and putting together. So I think there's a lot of excitement coming around those.
Yes, yeah, definitely keep an eye out on those. We're going to go much more in depth on how to take a base data set and kind of go from soup to nuts here. So a lot of what you didn't see here, take that base data, create what we call the data model in Power BI, which is here. You can see the raw data here. This is what it looks like when it's coming in. Again, just table views, probably not foreign to most people. But how to go from that to actually create our visualizations. And so we're going to start a lesson with that. And then we're also going to have an advanced version of that where you come with your own data sets, you come with your own Excel spreadsheets, and we work on creating dashboards based on your data instead of sample data, which may be the more valuable one. But the first session that I believe was announced today will get you that base level of knowledge where will be comfortable then going in and figuring out how to get these insights out of your own data.
So, and we're getting asked, where do they learn about the upcoming workshops on Power BI? And they will be announced in the Future of Work Initiative site. So they'll be sending out announcements for them and they'll be posting them on their site.
Yes, and I believe the first one is going to be May 6th, if I'm remembering correctly.
Any other questions that anybody has? There were a lot of comments that you may not have seen, Ed, but people seemed pretty excited about what they were seeing.
Oh, good. Yeah. I can't see the comments while I'm presenting, but the power that the platform gives you without having to code this stuff is really increased, and Microsoft continues to invest in this product. So it's definitely something to check out and something that can provide value back and give you some great insights based on the data sets that you're already working with day to day that maybe you haven't thought of before.
Yeah. So we also have a question in from Anna. Do you have a recommended resource for learning more machine learning concepts in Power BI?
So Microsoft does a pretty good job keeping up with their documentation set on Power BI. What you'll see when you start going through that is, and we can find a link to that here. What you see is you'll start going through that is there's going to be a division between what can be done on the desktop and what's in the service. So just because the service is all done through Azure, it's going to have a lot more power than what's shipped down to the desktop. So when you're going through and learning what's out there, just keep that in mind. What generally happens is once a service is being used out on Power BI service, some of the cognitive services, some of the Q&A, that stuff starts there. And then once once they figure out how it's working, they'll bring a subset of that down to Power BI Desktop. So it'll be a little later, but it does show up there. So let me grab let me do a quick search here, and we can at least get you started with that. Yeah, so there's a lot of these that are getting started. A lot of different segments to go through based on what you're doing, but Microsoft really tries to keep this up to date, and it's you'll end up referencing it pretty frequently if you get started with your Power BI journey. That, and once you get into Power BI, you'll also look at the documentation for things like DAX and M, which is the query language. So there's a few different things to learn. But since this was no code, low code, we didn't quite get into those, but we will in the workshops. So stay tuned.
So we have another question, Ed. Are any of these AI ML features able to be used in forecasting as well?
Yes. So we didn't show it, but there are tools to do statistical regressions, which are typically what is going to be forecasted or predictive data. So those kind of statistical functions are in here. It's limited to what's in the box. However, if you have, depending on how deep you're going to get, so if you have R or Python scripts that go a little deeper, maybe you model it a little bit differently, you can run R and Python scripts in Power BI Desktop now. You basically click a button, it opens up the window, you dump it in there, and it can run those in the background. So yeah, those kind of predictions on forecasting, the linear regression models are also available in Power BI Desktop. Basically, whatever you can do in R and Python, you can have run inside of Power BI Desktop now.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone? Sarah, do you want me to put the PowerPoint link or PowerPoint slide back up, or are you putting it up?
I can go ahead and do that for everyone here today as well.
Okay.
I got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And we can stay on for another few minutes in case you have some more questions. Appreciate everybody's enthusiasm on the chat.